You also write that something that that's really, really interesting and kind of, I think, kind of gets to the core of this. And again, because one thing about this is like, rape culture is so big, and we're going to get into more of it, because it's literally just like, again, you wrote an entire book about it. But one of the core problems of this is, as a society, we actually don't agree on what rape is, what it actually entails. And again, most people still sort of think about it as the jumping out of the bushes thing. But as a society, we actually don't agree on that. Let's dig into that and how much that really does the dangers of that for potential victims.
Sure. Well, there are lots of facets of rapes that we don't agree on. For instance, it was just in the news that Donald Trump's spokesperson was saying you can't rape your spouse. Well, that's not true. Marital rape is illegal in every state now, although that took much longer than a lot of people realize. But there are assumptions like that you assume that you can't rape your spouse, that you can't rape a man, that it's not rape if both parties were into it at first. If you're kissing someone and then you say no, even if you're engaged in any level of sexual activity and then you say no, a lot of people think like, no, you can't withdraw consent once it's already going, and that's absolutely not true. If you withdraw consent at any time, then that's it. Consent is the linchpin. And just in general, it's, even if we believe that maybe, she had a bad experience or something, it's again that thing when, especially when a woman has been drinking, if she's wearing a short skirt, all the classic things, if she's, gone out by herself, if she's generally enjoying life as an autonomous adult, and possibly even a sexual adult, then clearly, exactly, that, if a woman has ever given any evidence that she enjoys sex, then we can't possibly take her word for it that she has been raped.
Right. The second chapter of the book, you actually deal with what we're talking about a little bit now, is actually entitled "Safety Tips for Women," and again putting the onus of avoiding rape on the victim instead of the perpetrator of it. So let's dig into that a little bit. I mean, we were kind of talking again. All of this is sort of connected, but let's get into that a little bit more.
Well, we sort of act as though we think rape is inevitable, that it's like the weather. It's just going to happen no matter what. So we have to teach women to, look at their thermometer and bring an umbrella and make sure they know what the forecast is. And then, some women will get caught in the rain while they're dummies who didn't prepare themselves, right?
Right.
So we don't ever think about what can we do as a culture, as a society, as various institutions and systems to educate people about consent, to make sure that boys and young men learn the difference between consensual sex and rape. And I think most people get that fairly intuitively, I should say, but I want the concrete education to be out there to remove that kind of air of confusion and miscommunication and just to take away that excuse of like, oh, I thought she consented even though she didn't. Like, consent should involve bright lines, basically. But the safety tips, it's nuts. I talk about an email forward that, I remember first seeing about 15 years ago, and I'm sure it still has some kind of life, not even on email now, but social media somewhere, that it was like, grocery store parking lots are where women get raped, and you shouldn't wear a ponytail because rapists are looking to grab that and pull you away. Don't wear overalls because rapists carry scissors and will just cut them, and boom, there, your vagina's exposed.
So pretty much wear a suit of armor is kind of what they're asking for, right?
Pretty much. Wear a suit of armor. I mean, what it comes down to, when you take these kinds of lists of the safety tips, and then, of course, there's the more kind of reasonable stuff that still just puts the onus on women where it's like, well, you should be taking a self-defense course and you should carry your keys between your fingers and whatever.
Be a kung fu expert.
Right. Be a kung fu expert, exactly. What it comes down to is don't leave the house by yourself, especially after dark. we act as though we want women to be full participants in society, that we want them to be, as I said before, autonomous adults, that we want them to be independent, have full lives, but then we place all these restrictions, and all of it amounts to, like, if something goes wrong and you get raped just like getting caught in the rain, well, you should have known better, you should have done something differently, and really it's your fault for being a woman and thinking that you could just go out in public like a man.
Again, I'm talking to Kate Harding, author of the new book, Asking for It. You can find it at kateharding.info, on Twitter, at Kate Harding. Another aspect of rape culture, and we're going to, that's what the book is all about here, that you deal with, is bystanders. And people, again, with the invention, I mean, obviously this is something that existed before, but now with the invention of cell phones where people, and cameras and video cameras, everyone carrying around a video camera with them, it's kind of, that's something that's become a lot more clear now than it was prior to this. So let's talk about the not so innocent bystanders.
Sure. Well, I do want to say something that was actually a surprise to me in the research for this, which is that sort of documentation of these kinds of things actually predates camera phones by quite a lot. Peggy Reeves Sanday wrote a book called Fraternity Gang Rape in the early 90s, and she uses fraternity there to mean any kind of group of men who act as some sort of cohesive unit, not just actual, Greek college fraternities.
Yeah.
And she talks about how even in the 90s, they were videotaping, groups of guys like this would get together and they would gang rape someone and videotape it.
Wow.
That there would be photographs before that. And so now it's really just the technology keeping up with something that seems to have been a problem for a long time, that we just didn't know about it because we didn't have the technology for those videos to then go viral. And I think it's a double-edged sword, because I think obviously it's horrendous for the victims that, these videos are, especially if they're young kids, if they're teenagers, that these videos are suddenly all over school, that socially it does all this damage to them, that people are using it to slut-shame them. But it's also creating a record, that it's creating evidence that can be used in court, which is so interesting to me, because that's the big thing with with rape and with the way we go out of our way to make sure that we have that we don't ever give the woman the benefit of the doubt, because that might mean that we have erred on the side of
human decency.
Yes, heaven forbade.